Flint here from iAlign. Today we're going to talk about why it's so hard to overcome procrastination, distraction, and overthinking for good, and the 6 degrees of misalignment so you can figure out what degree of misalignment you have in your own life right now. Now, do you have a resistance to admitting that procrastination and overthinking are real problems for you? When I started trying to get a grip on my own distraction and avoidance, I refused to call it a real problem. I was the smart one, right? The engineer, the guy who always had a plan, the guy who could always explain better than anyone else exactly what he should be doing. Guys with plans this good don't have a problem, right? And yet every time I sat down to do the work that actually mattered, the second got hard or boring or anxious, I'd become a completely different person than the one in my own head, scrolling my phone or YouTube late into the night, starting new projects instead of finishing the ones I'd committed to, not asking for opportunities that I wanted, quietly falling behind. I knew exactly what I should be doing, but I still wasn't doing it. A lot of men resist ever calling this a real problem because it feels embarrassing to call it a problem. It's not like you're hopeless or starving. Your problems aren't that big of a deal. And because the vast majority of people out there don't name this as a problem, it's just distraction. When you talk about wanting to change it, you're called a perfectionist. You're told that you have a lot on your plate, everything's fine in moderation. That's exactly why this is so pernicious. It sounds like a silly thing to take real action against. It's not serious like a drug or alcohol addiction, right? And yet it's likely the leading reason you're not where you want to be in your life right now, because you're not spending your time consistently on the things that would move you toward the jobs, the projects, the creations, and the version of you and your life that you want. And slowly, without noticing, your inaction becomes evidence against yourself. And then it just becomes who you are. Now, there are two major signs that I look for when procrastination, distraction, and overthinking have crossed from normal human behavior into a real problem for a person. The first is you have a repeated loss of control. You've made the decision to change. You're going to stop overthinking. You're going to stop procrastinating. Start following through. Build the startup. Build the life that you're after. Be consistent with your actions. And then you fall back into the pattern several times. That is the misalignment gap, the space between I know exactly what I should be doing and the fact that you're still not doing it. And it comes in degrees of severity. The second thing that I look for is meaningful consequences. It's affecting your career, your ambitions, your relationships, your productivity. It's starting to affect your clarity over if you have a mission or purpose in life, or your confidence in a real way. The more strongly both of these two are present, the wider the misalignment gap usually is. How much control you've lost and how much it's costing you, they vary depending on different factors in your life. But before you can do anything about it, you have to find out what degree of misalignment gap you're at. And excuse me while I rant for just 1 second. This isn't a game. This is your life. Overthinking, distraction, and procrastination are serious problems that quietly destroy lives. Nearly 2.5 hours a day is the average amount of time spent scrolling. That's almost 1,000 hours a year. Over 3 hours a day on your phone, more than 4 for the younger guys. They check it almost 200 times a day, and 47 seconds is how long the average person can hold attention now. You're interrupted every 2 minutes, about 275 times a day, and it takes 23 minutes to fully refocus after any of those distractions. You do the math. Reality in this world is that you quickly lose your focus and never regain it. And the consequence is that you don't build the things and the life that you want. 1 in 5 adults is a chronic procrastinator, more common than depression or alcoholism. Only 1 in 3 American workers is engaged in his own work. And this doesn't happen by big crisis events. It's by 10,000 cuts of distraction and procrastination and overthinking over time until people are unrecognizable to themselves in the mirror in their lack of focus, motivation, spirit, and mission. And look, a handful of tips might help a 19-year-old who spends all day on his phone. But it does nothing for the 26-year-old who needs to start performing and taking risks in his career in order to create the life that he wants. Or the 34-year-old who feels like he's just thrown away his 20s. Or the 40-year-old who feels like he's sabotaged his career and his relationships. Or the 52-year-old who feels like the best of his life is behind him. So for any younger guys watching, you're sharp, you've got big goals, and this feels like something that'll just go away. Deal with it now, while it's still small, instead of spending years bouncing between new apps and 90-day challenges and fresh starts, because the longer you wait, the more of your life this costs, and the harder it gets to turn around. All right, rant over. Do you notice how some weeks you can't start anything, and others you're unstoppable and disciplined for weeks, even maybe a month or two? You get a bunch of work done and you tell yourself, this is who I am now. I'm going to keep it going like this. And then a switch flips and you're right back into your old behaviors. If you're honest, the pattern is more like I go hard for a while, I burn out, then I start the whole cycle over. And that's because of how severe your misalignment gap is and how ready you are to close it. This rises and falls with everything else in your life, your stress, your relationship, the season of life you're in, all those kind of things. And before we go down these degrees, as I'm about to explain, you need to hear what actually pulls a man down them, because it isn't laziness, and it isn't a lack of willpower, or strength or discipline. It is a negative feedback loop. You miss an action you told yourself that you would take, and instead of just noting it, you start to make it mean something about you. You're lazy. You're not disciplined. This just isn't who you are. And that verdict isn't harmless. It quietly becomes evidence, proof that you can point to, even if subconsciously, the next time. So when you sit down the next time to do the thing, you're not just facing the task and the distraction and the overthinking and the procrastination, you're facing everything you've already decided it says about you, which makes it heavier. So you avoid it again. And then shame collects one more piece of evidence. That is the engine that we're looking at. That's what walks a man down from the 2nd degree down to the 5th or the 6th. It's not one dramatic failure. Instead, it is a quiet loop of missing, then shaming, then avoiding, running in the background of your mind for 15 or 20 years. So here are the 6 degrees of the gap, from one you would barely notice to one that is wide enough to derail your entire life. The 1st degree, it's basically ideal alignment. This is the guy who only gets pulled off track once in a while. Think maybe 5, 10 days, a handful of days across the whole year, where distraction, procrastination, or overthinking meaningfully cost you something. At this degree, it usually isn't a persistent pattern. It mostly blends into the noise of normal human behavior. Even the most disciplined people have natural dips. But in a world as distracting and chaotic as this, geopolitics, AI and automation, layoffs, dating apps, all of it, there's a risk of it growing. But if you've got healthy ways of handling your emotions, your stress, and your life, you're in a good place. Now, in the 2nd degree, distraction and overthinking still aren't controlling your life, but they're showing up more often. Maybe once a month you procrastinate for multiple days when you should have been working. Maybe you get excited about something new, chase it hard, and then drop it the second the next shiny thing shows up. You started a project and left last month's unfinished. Maybe you're starting work late or letting lunches run a little long, getting pulled into screens or random thoughts. Part of it is you have too many things you want to do, and not one that you're genuinely focusing on. And some of those times off track weren't really about the task at all. They were about other things, like a general unease about where you are in life right now. And at this point, you started reaching for distraction or overthinking or procrastination to medicate, to feel a little better about some situation that you didn't want to face. Now in the 3rd degree, falling off track every month has become a cycle. Maybe for a few days at a time, sometimes for weeks, you repeatedly try to stop, yet each month you see the same behaviors. The screen time came back, the same thoughts of being behind, another several nights of scrolling until you can't keep your eyes open, and then you get to bed at some time that you told yourself you wouldn't. It becomes a cycle. Come Monday, you'll start fresh, and then Monday turns into, let me just start by Tuesday, and then Tuesday you're so busy it gets pushed off again. You'll go for a week or two, and then you'll lose momentum because something happens and you miss one day, and then it's the same thing over again. There's no real plan for how you get back on. You rely on hope or locking in, which doesn't work. This is where most men start using willpower. Habit trackers, podcasts, self-help books, counting their streaks of good days. You recognize, I have a lot of motivation, I just don't have the right drive. I want to do these things, I just can't get myself to do them, and I always come up with some excuse. You rely on motivation to get started, and motivation doesn't show up on schedule. These are patterns that aren't out of control yet. But, and this is important, your tolerance for what you accept as okay is quietly changing. What you used to call a bad week is just starting to feel like who you are. You spend a lot of time in your head overthinking or daydreaming instead of acting. You beat yourself up for overthinking. You pick up your phone seconds after you put it down. And here's the trap again. You procrastinate, feel bad about it, then procrastinate by planning or researching or daydreaming more. And that gives you the feeling of progress, of relief from the negative emotions, without producing tangible progress. And that loop can gradually deepen the gap and pull you into the 4th degree. Now, around this point, a strange thing happens specifically for smart, capable, or competent men. Their intelligence becomes their cage. And I'll explain what I mean by this in a moment. In the fourth degree, it's having an obvious effect on your life. Career, your relationships, your personal projects, or your view on just life in general. The distractions are effectively out of control. So when you're not working, you're constantly in your own head about it, especially before bed. Your brain feels scattered, like you have 100 browser tabs open at once, probably because you actually do. And the most painful part is that you can see it perfectly. You can see the steps, you just can't take the action. You get online and type how to stop procrastinating, how to find my purpose in life, building deep focus. But from the back of your head come the voices, come on, everyone does this, it's not that big of a deal. This is where your mental cage comes up. You can explain your own problem and the path out of it better than the people who study it or claim to help you. I call this validation by analysis. You will build the perfect science-backed 10-step plan in your head or on a spreadsheet showing exactly how you'll move past this. But building the plan satisfies enough of the urge to take action, and then you find yourself cleaning half your apartment instead of doing anything that actually matters, because you've satisfied the urgency already without actually taking action. You use your systems thinking and your logical mind and your intelligence in order to avoid the action that you know you need to be taking. And in my experience, around the fourth degree is where changing this alone starts becoming dramatically harder. Beyond this point, avoidance is so often woven into your self-image and into your behavior and your daily decisions that outside perspective, structure, and accountability become increasingly important. These patterns stop feeling like isolated behaviors and begin getting absorbed into your self-image. Self-doubt creeps in. Not good enough starts showing up in your head more than you'd like. And underneath it all is a fear that you don't say out loud, that if you really tried, you'd find out you actually can't do it. You feel like you're banging your head against the wall saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. But I'm failing, and I'm behind where I know I could be. And one belief like that, left unchallenged, can dictate the actions you take or don't take for years. Now, through my experience, research, and coaching, I repeatedly see two broad response patterns around this fourth degree. I call them the builder and the seeker. Most men aren't purely one or the other, but they usually recognize themselves more strongly in one. The builder is the already accomplished guy, established in his career, relatively balanced life, friends, close family, his health, etc. So when he realizes he has a problem, he does the one thing he's always done with problems worth solving. He asks for help. He brings in a mentor, he hires a coach, he puts real money and effort behind it because he figured out a long time ago that the way through is to stop trying to white knuckle it alone. Some of my most driven clients are exactly this. They're engineers, founders, scientists. Occasionally, some builders still don't reach out, usually when their success has insulated them from seeing how much the pattern is actually costing them. The seeker is the second kind of response pattern. He's got good intentions, but he already struggles to motivate himself and is falling behind on his goals. Bad habits with his electronics, with food, his consumptive behaviors, and time management in general have taken the spark he used to have, and he knows he's living way below what he's capable of. He's got a genuine desire to succeed, but he's failed at this enough times that he's stopped trusting himself to pull it off. There's a specific pain underneath this. You've taken a couple things part way, maybe pursuing the new group you want to be a part of or the job you want to pursue. And then you told yourself, even if just subconsciously, that it might not work out. And then you stopped putting in the right amount of effort. And then, lo and behold, because you stopped putting in the right amount of effort, you didn't get the thing that you wanted. This has happened several times, which of course has led to multiple iterations of things that you wanted not working out. Some seeker-type men have been diagnosed or self-diagnosed with something like ADHD, and the condition itself may be completely real, but over time they also may begin using the label as a complete explanation for why change is impossible for them, until something finally cracks that story open for them. As one man told me, I always told myself it was just my personality, and then one day I realized, no, this is not me and it's hurting my life. The seeker seeks out the smart or academic guys on social media who remind him of himself and ends up in echo chambers of try harder, count your days, use this new science-backed protocol, or overcommitting to so many more things in order to hold himself accountable. Watch more videos, consume more. He takes what feels like big decisive action, but it's usually just more research and thinking. Building more plans about how to be productive, consuming content on how to do the next thing without actually doing the thing. 500 tabs are open, a dozen half-built projects, all of it carried alone, stuck in analysis paralysis. And when it gets unbearable, the tabs disappear, and he goes looking for help. But because some part of him still doesn't feel like meaningful change is worth investing in, he often reaches for whatever feels low risk or quick. So it's the app, the challenge, the guru, and frequently ends up right back where he started. If you saw yourself in The Seeker, or you're mostly a builder, but a few of the Seeker comments landed, don't get demotivated. I was a seeker too. I quite literally published a book called Seeking Authenticity until I found mentors who opened my eyes to my own self-sabotaging ways of thinking and avoiding and not doing. And that brings us to the fifth degree. At this point, distraction and avoidance are a daily habit, a major part of your life. You're overthinking or scrolling before you sleep. The first thing you do in the morning is check your phone before you brush your teeth. Life feels comfortably numb because you have enough to sustain yourself, but not really to fulfill yourself. If you're honest with yourself here, you're quietly starting to give up on your bigger ambitions. You don't finish things, sometimes you isolate yourself more than is healthy, you don't take the risk on the startup or the business idea or just the personal project that you're genuinely curious about, or ask for a raise or to work on the team that you really want to work on. Not doing these things starts to sound less like a possibility and more like a prediction on how these events or how your life is going to go. And part of what keeps you there is that you've been too scared to fully go for something, even though you could tell it was right for you. Anytime I talk to a man in the fifth degree, he's paid a heavy price. First, his career. He's probably lost years. And when I say lost years, it doesn't necessarily mean he's been unemployed for years. It's not because he did nothing. It's because he never really fully put himself in the game. It usually sounds like a smart guy thinking, I've been told I'm really smart my whole life. But if you looked at my life, you'd never know that based off of what I've actually done with it. It's like my life is a series of unfinished experiments. I'm 35 and it feels like I'm somehow still at square one. And underneath this runs a quiet comparison. You look at people who seem to have it figured out and it makes you feel behind. You feel trapped in a cage you created in your own head. And when a man tries to pull himself out at this point, the resistance hits hard. Restlessness, irritability, fatigue, worrying way too much about what everyone else thinks. The pull back to distraction is enormous. By this point, he doesn't even know how to start. Sometimes a guy here will say, I've been a zombie for a while. I quiet quit my career, I quiet quit my life, my relationship. Why try anyways? Both the builder and the seeker realize they need help when the gap has gotten to the fifth degree, but they respond very differently. The builder finally tells someone he trusts, like a friend or maybe a mentor, and half the time they're surprised because that person turned out to be fighting the exact same thing. The seeker will either shrug it off and quietly allow for the fifth degree gap to become permanent, or he reaches out just far enough to ask for advice, but never far enough to actually commit. And now we get to the sixth degree. This degree is defined by feeling completely out of control and incapable of catching up. Every single day is shaped by avoidance. This is where it stops being about lost hours and starts being about a lost life. The potential you knew you had as a kid that your parents broke themselves to give you is mostly gone now. Not in one blow, it was lost slowly while you watched. You wake up one day and go, what have I been doing for the last 15 years? And it's not that you don't want to change, you do. It's that the self-doubt and the lack of any self-belief left in yourself is overwhelming. This guy carried a dream since he was 19 and never started it, and crossed a line from I'm behind into a verdict about his whole life of I have to be like this for the rest of my life. I'm hopeless right now. Or worse, it's like I'm obeying someone else's decision, not mine. That's the tell of the sixth degree gap. Your dreams stop being deferred and become disowned. This is the guy who's 54. He's watching a man he trained 3 years ago run his department, and that guy's kind to him, but that kindness is the part that burns. It's the man whose wife stopped asking about his dreams years ago because she watched him break his own heart enough times that she couldn't keep watching. It's the body slowly becoming his father's, on schedule, the thing he swore at 30 he'd never allow. It's watching his 12-year-old son start doing the exact same avoidant things, the flinch from the hard thing, the retreat into the screen, and having nothing to say because he never found a way out himself. It's the bank balance that never really moved, while men he knows he's sharper than doubled, tripled, quadrupled theirs. Or the business he sketched out, or the passion project he sketched out, maybe 100 times. Maybe he even registered an LLC for it, but he never once truly tested it. It's a man who told me flatly, I feel like a loser. I wasted my time. I'm lying to everyone. Deep down, I'm not okay. When the gap gets to the sixth degree, a man's whole life fills up with small lies to cover it. I'm fine, I'm just busy. And he can keep this up for years, for decades. And when it catches up, the price is enormous. Relationships, his career, the years he can never get back. You'll admit that you've been stuck for years, but you genuinely can't see how much it's actually costing you. The deeper in you are, the less you can feel it. So if a part of you is thinking, it's really not that bad for me, understand that the numbness, saying that, is the symptom, not the proof. And I know talking about the sixth degree can feel quite heavy. So I want to walk you through something I do, an exercise I do. I call it the waiting room. I call it that because that's what these years have really been. You've been sitting around in the waiting room of your own life, holding a number, waiting until you're ready, waiting until you're sure, waiting for the confidence to show up first, waiting for the right moment that keeps not arriving. And here's the part that nobody says out loud. The waiting was never the enemy. It was protection. As long as you were still in that room, still planning, still researching, still daydreaming, still opening up new tabs and talking about new ideas, still getting ready to start, you never actually had to find out. You got to keep the fantasy that you could do it. Your name just hadn't been called yet. Because underneath all of this is the one thing you're really afraid of, that if you really tried with everything you had, you'd find out you can't actually do it. So the waiting kept you safe. It let you believe the potential was still there, still intact, as long as you never put it to the test. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about in the waiting room. There's no receptionist. Nobody is ever going to call your name. And the door out, the one you've been sitting across from for 15 years, was never locked. With the right questions, we get you up out of the chair in the waiting room and we walk you to the door, not to fix your whole life today, just so that for one moment you're standing on the other side of it. No number, no waiting, no someday, just you taking decisive action. Because the decade of progress you lost toward your dreams from these behaviors is gone. But that doesn't mean that the next decade has to be too. Men finally stand on the other side and look back and see everything that the waiting room cost him, the things he never built, the money and raises that went to people who were willing to start without needing the perfect plan, the mission that they never created clarity on and took decisive action on and became proud of, the trips he kept swearing he'd take the next year, the relationships he only half showed up for, and most of all, the trust in himself he traded away one avoidant action at a time. It can feel like waking up from years you spent on autopilot, where the fear did the choosing and you called the result your life. The self-betrayal, the quiet lie that you'd get to it eventually, the ambitions you gave up on so slowly you didn't even notice. And you catch sight of who you'd be if you hadn't waited to follow through for so long. And here's the only thing that matters. That man isn't dead. He's not gone. He's been on the other side of that door the whole time, just waiting for you to finally walk through it. For most guys, that is the moment where something clicks and they're done living like this. And that's when they make a real commitment to start. Because now you've felt, even for just a second, what it's like to trust yourself again. And so before you go looking for a way out, hear this. Because you've almost certainly tried to fix this already. And I bet it was some version of the same handful of things. First, you tried to force it. More willpower, more discipline. I just need a lock-in. But willpower is just an emotion. It's fickle and it's unreliable. You cannot build a life on a feeling that only shows up when it feels like showing up. And locking in, the second you tell yourself you're going to grind for the next 3 months straight, you create a burst of excitement, another emotion, one that doesn't last. And that's exactly what sends you back to your distractions. Because who wants to do 3 months of work right now, today? It's not even possible. Real consistency was never heroic. It's being able to wake up on any given Tuesday morning and choose positive, healthy, core value aligned behaviors again and again and again. And when forcing it didn't hold, you tried to create the perfect plan. The color-coded schedule, the new app, the new planner, one more self-help or time management book, a little more research first. But you already know this one's a lie because you've bought the planner before, you've made the spreadsheet before, or the Notion board. The perfect plan is not something you think your way to before you begin. It is born through aligned action. I quite literally call this action-based decision-making. You build clarity over your core values, use that clarity to identify your next steps, take those first messy steps, equip yourself with the right tools to handle the emotions that show up when those first messy actions get taken. Reality shows you what's actually true, and the real plan gets built out of that. You do not plan your way to a good plan. In contrast, Planning it perfectly first isn't the responsible version of starting. It's actually the sophisticated, systems-minded version of waiting. And when none of that worked, you did the thing you always do. You turned on yourself. I'm lazy. There's something wrong with me. Why can't I just do this? And sometimes it worked. You shamed yourself into inaction. But beating yourself up isn't a long-term sustainable path to consistency. Only compassionate accountability is. Real accountability isn't attacking yourself into changing. It's compassionate and honest at the same time. You fall off, you collect the data, what actually happened, you equip yourself with the right tools to raise the probability that you take action tomorrow, and that's it. There's no verdict on yourself, there's no attack, there's no shame, because everything you're actually chasing, the plan, the confidence, the discipline, the trust in yourself, none of it comes first. It gets built on the far side of action. That's the whole game. Understanding these degrees of the alignment gap is the whole key to actually getting out. It's why none of those quick fixes work on their own. A willpower push, a streak, a 90-day challenge only ever does something for the guy in the first or maybe the second degree. To create lasting change, you or whoever is guiding you first has to understand how wide the gap has become and what is maintaining it. And once I know what is creating the gap for a person and how severe, what degree it is for them, I know the exact moves we take. How to set the boundaries, how to build the self-awareness, how to get control over the overthinking or the distractions, how to deal with the hard emotions when they come or communicate effectively, create clarity and prioritize, focus more deeply, and take the decisive action that rebuilds the self-trust and the confidence he lost. Now, if you're more of a seeker, you might be thinking, okay, you're making this sound complicated and almost impossible. Notice that reaction for a moment. It may be the same protective pattern that tells you to look for an easier answer the second meaningful change starts feeling uncomfortable. Fight it for just a moment for me, because the builder is already thinking about how he's going to use this. The point here is, take the first step and identify the degree of your misalignment gap. And be straight with yourself about which one you are, a builder or a seeker. Neither one is bad. I was a seeker who wanted to be a builder. I finally got up, asked for help, walked out of that waiting room, and dedicated several very painful, intense years to changing my life, one honest action at a time, until I could trust myself again. Because the truth and the way to close the gap is the opposite of the thing that widened it. Just as inaction becomes evidence against yourself, action becomes the evidence that you can trust yourself again. So tell me, where do you land here? How wide is your misalignment gap? Which degree is it at? In which of the two avatars are you? Are you a builder or are you a seeker? Maybe with some builder traits. I would love to know. And if this was helpful, drop that below in the comments and pass this on to one or two men who you think may need it. I'm Flint from Eyeline, your friend on this journey. I am in this with you. I'm not above it. Subscribe to this channel, and if you're interested, book a strategy session at www.eyeline.app/free-call and gain control over your self-defeating overthinking, procrastination, and distraction so you can build the work, the projects, and the life you know you're capable of. Peace.